Hey folks, here we are at the final 2024 episode of Digging for Kryptonite. I want to thank you all for a wonderful year. My sincere thanks to every guest, audience member, and patron who joined us on this ride. I couldn't be prouder of the episodes that we delivered this year. So we are going to be on a short hiatus for just a few weeks, and then we'll be back with brand new episodes early in January 2025. At the same time, if and when James Gunn drops a Superman 2025 teaser or trailer, we will return with an emergency breaking news edition. But other than that, we will be on hiatus after this episode. So in the meantime, over the next few weeks, first and foremost, I hope everyone has a safe, healthy, and happy holiday season. I hope you can enjoy and get some rest. But if you are looking for anything on the podcast front, we have a vast, robust back catalog of almost 200 episodes. So I would say, especially if you are new to Digging for Kryptonite, please dig through our back catalog. We have covered a ton over the past 4 years. If you're not sure if we've covered something, please feel free to reach out, but please check out our past episodes. If you've been enjoying the show and you haven't already done so, please leave a rating or review. Most podcast platforms allow you to at least rate the podcast. Apple Podcasts in particular allows you to write a review. If you haven't done so already, it just takes a couple of minutes and is a great way to help share what you enjoy about the show with other folks as well, to hopefully make the podcast more enticing when they are browsing through podcasts to listen to. So thank you to everyone who already has. And if not, I hope you'll take a moment to do so. I also do want to mention that we have our George Reeves Adventures of Superman Rewatch podcast. Our coverage of season 2 and the entire black and white era is nearing its end very shortly. We'll be dropping our episode on Around the World with Superman, the season 2 finale. It is one of the absolute standout episodes of the George Reeves series, both the black and white era and the series as a whole. So if you've been looking for an episode to sample, even if you're not really familiar with the George Reeves show, or if you've never even watched that particular episode, that's a great one to sample. And I hope you will check that out as well. But like I said, more than anything else, happy holidays. And now enjoy the final episode of 2024 on Superman and Lois, the final season. We reference the television series Smallville a lot around here, and there's one Smallville rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor as they discuss each and every episode of the series that ushered in the renaissance of superhero TV. Listen to Always Hold On to Smallville wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On to banner, including Arrow, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Superman and Lois, and Star Wars. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations: Harrison, New York, aka my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have kids and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Established in 1982 and under new ownership since 2020, Moose sells a wide selection of comics from every publisher and time period, along with action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Filmmakers and movie fans alike should be sure to attend these film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and Round Reel in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Take it from an alum of 2 of them. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the 4th and final season of the CW series Superman and Lois, starring Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch, is our pal from Aw Yeah Comics, Skokie, sweet Bernie Gersmeyer. Welcome back, my friend.
Hey, Anthony. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Could not be more excited. Bernie, would you like to do the honors? Would you like to give folks their official spoiler warning for Superman and Lois season 4?
Yes, everybody. If you've not yet seen any of Superman and Lois season 4, we're going to talk about everything that has to do with season 4. If you don't want to be spoiled, or find out things you don't want to find out, stop right now.
Thank you, my friend. So, in messages with certain fellow Superman fans and on social media, I had been describing season 4 as my supervillain origin story.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of expected to come in here hot, like guns blazing.
Oh.
And I'm happy to report that after sort of sitting with the season and the series finale in particular for a little while, and watching the series finale a couple of times, and for the second viewing, I sat down with my wife and we watched it together. I would say that my position on season 4 overall has softened somewhat, though I won't sugarcoat it. There were a number of fairly major roadblocks to my enjoyment of the season and the series finale. We're going to get into it. Let me issue this disclaimer, and I'm going to do my best not to keep saying this as we move forward. I'm going to say it now, and folks, please keep it in mind. It really seems like this season delivered in a very powerful way for a lot of Superman fans, at least in terms of what I've seen on social media. And if that's you, awesome, beautiful. I in no way, shape, or form want to take away from anyone's enjoyment of the final season. I wish I had the same reaction. Believe me, and please, I hope everyone really takes this to heart. Nobody wanted to love this season more than I did. So I want to lay that out at the outset. And I also want to say that I do genuinely believe that this was a season of television made with a lot of love and care and within some really tough budgetary restrictions. And I'm very well aware of all of that. So I just kind of want to say that at the outset. I think a lot of what's going to come, there were a number of things I liked about the season, but I think probably the main thrust of my part of this conversation is probably going to be sort of the things that I didn't like. So I wanted to say that at the outset. Now, the last question before we get more specific into all of this, I want to ask you, Bernie, what are your feelings, just big picture feelings at this point in time towards the final season and in particular the series finale?
I think what's really good that you had me specifically on this episode is that while you and I both track and have lots of similarities, I think I will balance out the seesaw between positive and negative for the fans and for those listening. So maybe things that you didn't necessarily like, I may very well have liked. I think we can both agree that the very last 20 minutes was not something that we expected. And we're going to talk about that. It doesn't mean I didn't like it. It's just not something I expected in the show to kind of jump and do that. But I kind of spent one of the reasons I was running late is because I was actually kind of doing a lot of recapping and taking some notes and really wanted to make sure I could dig in. I remembered a lot, but I wanted to really look at the rundown a little bit more. And I was finding that my positives really do outweigh the negatives for this season. So that is a good thing. And I think maybe as you and I have experienced, we kind of talk each other off the ledge sometimes where maybe you're like, no. And I go, but wait. And you go, oh, okay.
Very true. Very true. And I would love nothing more than to come out of this discussion feeling even better about this final season than I did coming in. Yeah. And I would say more than anything else, what has allowed me to come to terms with, make peace with this final season and the ending in particular is that I think Superman and Lois was really true to itself all the way through, yes. Especially at the end. And
they knew exactly what they were making and they stayed true to the tone of the show.
And while I might not have agreed with all of the choices, I can respect them and can acknowledge that was the story they were telling. So
agreed.
I promise I'm not going to monologue for this whole episode, but I got to get this out because I've been sitting on this for 8 weeks as I've been watching these episodes.
Hang on tight, everybody. Hold on.
I hope I haven't built this up too much on social media because I haven't been sharing a ton on social media because I wanted to wait until the season was done. I wanted to see the full picture before I really said too much. And I also, because I saw so much love and positivity towards these episodes, I didn't want to rain on anybody's parade. So I've really been kind of playing it close in terms of how I feel about all of this. But part of me feels like I might have built up expectations too much here. I don't know that I have necessarily these groundbreaking revelations that I'm going to share here. But these were the main, I'll call them roadblocks to my enjoyment of the season. Okay. I don't feel that the show maximized the storytelling potential of the death and return of Superman. And I feel that from two perspectives. I feel it from the perspective of a comic book, quote unquote, fanboy who has a lot of love for the original comic book storyline. There were things, for example, Reign of the Superman, that I feel this show was uniquely situated to bring to the screen, and it chose not to. But on that note, I can respect that was their choice, and that was not the story they set out to tell. So I can put that aside. But the other perspective is just as a fan of this show. And I truly feel they left a lot on the table. I don't think that Superman's absence and Superman and Clark's return landed and had the impact that they could and should have. Lex. This is not a knock on Michael Cudlitz at all. I love the physicality. I loved at times the intensity that he brought, but this was, for me, far too much of a narrow, single-minded, one-note Lex, whose range seemed to be quiet angry or loud angry. And because he was such a big driver this season, it was very difficult for me to get on board with a lot of his storyline. Next is the secret identity reveal. Now, I have a lot of big picture philosophical objections to this that are actually going to be the basis for one of our early 2025 episodes. But specifically in the context of Superman and Lois season 4, what irked me was I feel like the aftermath of the identity reveal was such a naive, unrealistic, and I'll even go so far as to say half-assed look at what their life would actually be like in the aftermath of him revealing his identity. And finally, in the series finale itself, as we've given our spoiler warning, people know or maybe are going to learn about it here, but they don't mind learning about it here. In the final moments of the series finale, we get this decades-long flash forward, and we see the final years of Lois and Clark. And in the final moments, we see the spirit of Clark encountering all the important figures in his life before having this, we'll call it, afterlife reunion with Lois. And did it conjure emotions? Did my eyes tear up at times? Yes, it did. I will not deny that. I also feel like it's real low-hanging fruit. And I feel like we have seen this ending or a version of this ending from an awful lot of shows, including Arrow, including This Is Us, which I would argue did it a lot better not all that long ago. And I think what kind of bugged me the most about the ending was this quote unquote realization that Clark has about how it's really all about love and family. I feel like it was built up to be this revelation to him or to the audience, but I feel like it wasn't a lesson he actually needed to learn. I feel like he would have said the same thing in the pilot of the show. So there was something about that ending, as emotional as it was, that just kind of felt manipulative and didn't feel like it was, well, I'll say it again, the choice that I would have made. But I recognize it wasn't my choice to make, and it's not my show. I thank you. That's the end of my rant/monologue.
That's a lie. He's not done, everybody. He's gonna have more. All right, I'll work backwards.
Perfect. Actually, I was thinking that as well, because I feel like the very end of the show is probably what is top of mind for most of the audience and for us as well. So yes, let's start there. We'll just plunge right in to the end of the show.
Yeah, man. So here's the thing. I think we can argue that for what we wanted this show to end with was probably not those 20 minutes, was not Clark walking through the next 30 years, losing Lois to cancer again, walking through what was left, getting a dog, calling him Crypto, all those different things. There were so many great things about it, but we didn't really, I don't know if I needed that. But I won't say it didn't hit me emotionally. It did hit me. When I watched that scene again after me and Lana watched it, and she was like, "Okay, that was good. I'm not upset, but I didn't love it, but I'm not upset." So after she was gone, I watched it again. I think we need to look at this show and the ending in a vacuum. I think you and I and many people are tainted by so many other mediums, so many other comics. We are lovers of Smallville. We have different things affecting our opinions all the time. So I think if we look at it in a vacuum of Superman and Lois, episode 1 to episode 10 of 4, I think the arc is fine. I think it ends well. I think the tone, like you said, matches. I think they knew exactly the show they wanted to make. The show is called Superman and Lois. It is not called Superman. So we have to remember the show ends as it began, about Superman and Lois. Sidebar, that red dress, super hot.
I mean, she
Come
was
on.
stunning. And it's a wonderful
Stunning.
callback to
Yeah.
that episode from season 3 when we had the flashback
Which
to the
I
dress. Yeah.
Also love that. So let me just put a pin there and just say, while I didn't love it as a Superman fan, I loved it as an ending for this show.
No, I agree. And that's the thing. I'm on record. I've said this and I maintain this, that when we talk about how the Superman or Superman and Lois generally story should end, the quote unquote, whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow finish, that is what I gravitate towards the most. We have seen, and in the comics in particular, we've seen so many different spins on this. We've seen versions where he outlives everyone and then starts a family with Wonder Woman in the future, right? In the Kingdom Come timeline. We've seen in that Tom King Action Comics 1000 storyline, there's this potion that Lois has to continually take that enables her to live as long as Clark does. So we've seen different versions. 1 million, Grant Morrison's 1 million, where Lois is recreated in the far future and they have this reunion. And all of those are intriguing in their own right. But in my heart, what I do always come back to, and it's why I ultimately made peace with the Smallville scene in Crisis on Infinite Earths, the television adaptation, because I think the idea of the God becoming man, the never-ending battle finally does end for him, and he becomes human, and he lives out his final days with Lois. That, to me, in my heart, in my gut, feels like the best, most appropriate, most satisfying conclusion for the character I love the most. So the idea that that's where he ultimately landed in this show, I feel good with that. I think it was more just in terms of the presentation of it. And I will say, to be clear,
I agree. Yeah.
I was not, if I'm being totally honest, I was far more, well, I'll say it, outraged and offended by the end of the Smallville finale with the CGI costume and the Lex Mindwipe.
Yes.
Just for point of reference for people, I didn't feel that way about the end of the Superman and Lois finale. I just, as I said before, it just kind of bugs me that so many shows these days are really gung-ho on these afterlife reunions for their characters.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I think those shows it doesn't always work because it doesn't match the tone of that show. But Superman and Lois, I feel like there is a Hallmarkian quality already to Superman and Lois, if you think about it. So I don't love how it kind of got really deep into the Hallmark feels towards the end, but it tracked enough for me because I already felt it a little bit through the show as it was. I'm more confused by the plot hole of I'm good with the Superman becoming man, loving, living, dying. If how they moved John and Jordan into super suits and they continue that story. I think it was really important that they could have said, the boys got their new suits. That was dope. That was awesome. And it looked like the cover of one of the recent Superman issues that looked so cool with them all as a family there. Let it be there. The boys grew up. They had their own families as well, but they also took on the legacy and continued to work on saving the world. But they didn't. And that's what bothered me because now boys grew up and had families and there was no other mention of them being heroes still. And that is what bothered me because that's a loose end that they could have just kept to appease both sides of the story, the super and the man.
The moment where the boys grew up and we now had new actors, and yes, one of them was Bitsy Tulloch's real life husband, which fans thought that was cool, which is nice. But once we got to that point, it took me out of it. I just kind of felt like, all right, we're past a certain point here. I wasn't as connected with it. I'll say this in terms of what it was like watching the finale. We get to the end of the battle with Lex, and we're with our core cast on Main Street. Yeah. And then it cuts to black, commercial break. I hit pause at that point, and I said, okay, it's been 22 minutes. We've got another 22 minutes to go. I said, this is the point where they're probably going to piss me off.
It's a lot of time.
Yes.
It's a lot of time left.
A lot of time left. And I was like, okay, this is where it's going to go one of two ways. And we start after that commercial break with 1 year later. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I see what they're going to do here. We're going to get 1 year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. That's what I assumed. And kind of that's what they did. It's just that we didn't get those increments. We just had that sort of 1 year later time frame with Lana and John Henry's wedding. And then we had this decades long montage narrated by Clark. Yeah. I do want to say that 1 year later portion, focusing on the positives where we can. Yeah. I loved the Lana and John Henry wedding and
Agreed.
Lois's words about them, even though my wife, she was like, Lois is making it all about herself, which may be fair.
That's fair. She's a reporter.
but everything she said about both of them, but I got to tell you, man, when she said to John Henry, you truly are a man of steel. And he gave her that like little bow. Oh, that did it for me. I thought that was so beautiful. And
I liked Lana's and Kyle's ending. I like a lot of the we were doing the closure in so many good ways. I did not like Lois's cancer coming back. I'll be honest. I didn't like that. We don't have to give her pain to make it sad. Let her die naturally. Let her die like Ma Kent.
Yes.
Let her it's okay.
But no, I love the Lana Kyle scene, like you said. And that was one of the things I appreciate, that the show really had its hands tied and they were so limited budget wise. I got to tell you, I really thought we were going to see the budgetary cuts more in the VFX. I mean, going into this season, I assumed, and we have a lot more to say about Doomsday, but I assumed we were just going to cut to the aftermath of the battle and maybe you'd get some flashes. So from a special effects standpoint, visually, what they were able to do with their budgetary cuts was so impressive. But I got to tell you, even with the supporting cast popping up a few times each, I really felt the absence of the supporting cast this season. And I know I see this all the time on X in particular, a lot of Cushing bashing whenever Kyle shows up. To me, that guy represents what separates this show from Arrow or Flash or any of the other Arrowverse shows where they're all superheroes in a bunker. This is the human element that you need. And so when we got to that finale and finally Lana and John Henry are together and Kyle and Lana have this closure, it's like, oh, this is the show again. So I was very much at home. I very much enjoyed that 1 year later piece. And then when we enter our final segment of the show and we hear Clark's words, the first time I died, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And then we see that, I believe, real world news footage of the little girl in the trash heap and the riots. I don't know if they filmed that or if that was news footage that they purposed, but it was
interesting.
It was interesting, but that's where the worry kind of started to set in. Where I'm like, okay, where are we going with this? And then, of course, it unfolds. I would say, for me, I think the most awkward points of that final montage were the boys aging up, and I get it, but it just took me out of it. I felt disconnected at that point.
Yes.
And Clark's spirit rising from the bed, like literally sitting up. I was like, I don't like this. I don't like that.
I would agree. Those moments felt very Hallmark to me.
No, I agree. Now, I have a number of audience comments and questions. The call went out to our patrons, as it always does, and then I opened it up to our general audience because I know people have a lot to say about this, and so I'm going to sprinkle these in as we go here. So we have a comment from our pal Joseph Abe Martin. He says, I feel it ended about the only way it could have. We knew that Clark was on borrowed time based on having a human heart, but what I didn't see coming was the sad ending for Lois, and while it was sad, I didn't hate it. I felt it wrapped up all the characters in solid fashion like a series finale should. Mitch said, I kind of liked the finale, but it didn't knock my socks off. The final battle with Luther, which you and I are going to talk a lot more about, was entertaining
Oh,
enough. Interesting to see glimpses of what happens to Clark and Lois and family over the years. But those rando male models as adult Jonathan and Jordan almost ruined it. Thank God they got the final regular actors back for the final scenes in the afterlife. Yeah. And from our pal and guest, Scott Honig, he hits on something here that I wanted to talk about with you in particular, Bernie. I'm curious to get your take on all of this. We're going to get a little spiritual / metaphysical here. But Scott says, overall, I really enjoyed this season. I do have some mixed feelings about the end of the finale, though. I've always butted up against stories narrated by characters who have already died. It's a strange metaphysical paradox that just doesn't work for me. Add in the visuals of Clark's spirit sharing a final moment with each member of the principal cast before joining a ravishing in red Lois in the afterlife, and it feels too idealistic for this atheist. I think a stronger way to accomplish the same thing would be to have Clark insist on living his final days in the Fortress of Solitude and dying with his sons by his side. Before he leaves Smallville and this plane of existence for good, he has a final moment with each character. That way, the dialogue can communicate his final thoughts before he finally expires in the fortress, perhaps even with one more Lara cameo. And I'd even throw in Ma and Pa Kent for good measure. As his consciousness fades, his last image could still be that of Lois, but without all the metaphysical baggage of an actual spiritual reunion.
You know, I guess I go back and forth because I don't really know if it's ever really talked about on the show what Clark and Lois's beliefs are, or whether they believe in heaven, or how that would work. So I don't really know if we need to approach it that way. However, Scott brings up a very interesting point, because it does bother me when we do that trope of, I'm going to talk about my own death now. I guess I'm going to pose this question, which I'm wondering as I was listening to him read what he wrote, how interesting it could have been if instead of Clark narrating that, if Lois did. Like, what if Lois was the one, as the reporter, kind of from that vein, talking about and narrating what happened to the Man of Steel, the Superman that she loved and the Clark that she loved, and what happened next. And finally, I came to the end of my life, but then Clark had more time left. And she told that story from her point of view. But then he rejoined me afterwards, and it was all about love. And it was, because then the story starts with Superman, but it ends with Lois.
Yeah, that symmetry could have been really lovely.
So again, like, it's not our job to rewrite these people that do really great at their jobs, but I mean, there's always the what if conversation, and I think that might have bothered people less because it is less of a trope. Because I think what they did at the end really felt very, very cliched, stereotypical, unfortunately.
Yeah, honestly, more than anything, I think that's what bothers me the most about this. Is just that we've seen this from so many shows. If anyone hasn't seen the end of Arrow yet, skip ahead 30 seconds. But there you see Oliver and Felicity reunite in the afterlife. So I just feel like we've seen this. And on Scott's note that he brought up here, they say don't discuss religion or politics, but I will share. And I feel like I've said this or a version of it in past episodes, but
yeah, sure.
And I guess I'll kind of quote Batman from Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader. Personally, I don't really believe in the afterlife. It would be great if it were true. I'm not trying to disprove it. It would be lovely if after this journey is over, you reunite with all of your loved ones. I would love nothing more. And there have been points in my life where I have really kind of believed that. At this point in time, in my heart, personally, that's not what I believe. I do think this is it, but I don't see that as a negative. To me, it just makes this journey that we're on all the more precious. And we don't need to do the right thing because we want to get a reward when it's done. We want to do the right thing for its own sake because this is what there is. And so maybe there's a little part of that that's kind of fueling my resistance to this ending. I won't lie. And I guess it's kind of debatable too, in terms of what they're actually saying about what the show is saying about what the afterlife is. It's not explicit. And in all honesty, you could make an argument. This is just what Clark is experiencing. Once again, I'm going back to Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader. This could just be what his brain is doing as it's dying, right? It's not that the show is literally saying, okay, there's an afterlife and this and that. So that's fine. It's not the hill I'm going to die on, but there's that aspect of it for me as well. And I think that just sort of feeds into my growing frustration with show after show kind of going down this road. That's all.
I think some of the this goes under my list of things that were positive. I think this journey and this ending does continue to drive home the humanity of Clark Kent. That it was like, clearly he was Superman, but he was Clark Kent, and Clark Kent, now the human side of him, now he dies like everybody else does. And I think that's what I found powerful. I found the love story between them powerful because I think that was the original intent of the show. It was not going to be a typical Superman show. It was not going to be even like Lois and Clark. It's specifically Superman and Lois, and it deals with him being Superman. And also we learn more about Clark, and then why is Lois so important? So I think, I'm going to say something that's probably going to piss you off, but I'm going to say it anyway. So there are aspects of the show that, to me, feel like a direct continuity from Smallville, the TV show.
Oh, no, I'm with you on that.
Okay. And I think the reason I get that, and it's very interesting, that you can actually make a case for one of the things that I believe you hate the most, which is that crisis connection to Smallville. If you look at this carefully, you could actually make a case that when Lex Luthor from that crisis episode comes to Smallville, he sees Tom Welling / Tyler Hoechlin as his powers have waned. He's older. He has kids. That's who the truck is. All that kind of stuff. And so it does work. Like, the continuity could still work. It's still, I feel like he's Superman at the end of Smallville, and then we take off, see how it all began. But I just think that the show does such a good job of focusing on the relationship, and they didn't ever balk at that this was going to be a show that was not about that. So I think they stuck true to their guns. I do feel very badly that this show got cut off. Like, I think the original plan, they said like 7 seasons. That was the hope. I honestly, I think if there wasn't so much idiocy inside Warner Brothers, the people should not blame James Gunn. It is not a James Gunn thing. I think there's such a weird to have a movie and a TV show happening at the same time. I don't understand why it's hard. But if we went 7 seasons, we could have gotten the drawn out Death and Return. I think we would have seen more space in that. And I think we would have seen more, like, I think the ending that we just saw would have, for you, maybe made more sense or felt better because it would have been a longer draw. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. I think I probably still would have, I think I still would have had the same objections. I don't disagree with you that there is this sort of spiritual connection point with Smallville, but I would argue that Superman and Lois clearly is drawing from a lot. When we talk about that final battle with Doomsday, I will bring up the question of where is the line between homaging a shot that another director visualized and outright ripping it off. Where do we draw that line? I don't know. But anyway, I think
which one? Wait, what are you talking about?
The Doomsday Punch when Superman turns his head. That is right out of Zack Snyder's Justice League with Steppenwolf. Right out of it.
Yes.
And I don't know what's the line there between, oh, that's cool, like they're referencing that versus like, oh, like they just copied a shot. I don't know what the answer to that is. But one of the things that they have said, the producers have said, and that has been said in all these articles about the ending of the show, it's historic. They are doing what no other live action Superman story has done. And fair point. They did, right? They showed you his final days. And I think I would have just been more okay with more of it being implied as opposed to like seeing so much of it. But that's fine. They did achieve something that no other story had done. And they took the opportunity. We've talked about this in various episodes, I'm sure. And I know it comes up on social media a lot, but you look at all of the other Superman shows, Smallville is an exception. They had an end game. They knew they were building towards their series finale, but that was ostensibly a prequel. You were ending with him becoming Superman. All of the other Superman shows ended on a cliffhanger or ended without any proper conclusion. They didn't know that was going to be their final episode. So this show yes, it was a truncated budget cut final season, but they still had a final season and they made the most of it. And this was the choice that they made. So I can respect that. You bring up though about what the larger plans were. And we have a question from our mutual friend, Perry Constantine from the Superhero Cinephiles podcast, who says, they said the series was originally envisioned as being 7 seasons. So would you have liked to see it live out its 7-season run? And if so, what are some things you would have liked to see? Obviously, Brainiac and Darkseid were teased, but I would have liked to see the boys go off to college and follow their journeys there and possibly a return to Metropolis. And what names do you think Jordan and John would take for themselves, or would they not even bother since their identities are public anyway?
And see, I actually would not have liked it to go to 7 seasons because I don't think it would. I think it would have been a slow burnout if they did all 7. But if we got, I mean, let's see, how long was the longest season of this show?
15
Was it
episodes.
A 22 episode?
No, 15. Seasons
15?
1 and 2, they did 15, and then season 3 was 13, and then season 4 was 10.
I wonder if season 4 was 15 and season 5 was 15, if we could have gotten a little bit more gasoline onto the fire and seen some more. I always worry sometimes. I saw it with Arrow and Flash and other shows that I think they passed that season 5 because many of those creators talked about, Berlanti talked about, it was originally going to be a 5-season show. Smallville itself was supposed to be a 5-season show. And I just think that 7 would have been too long. Yeah, we would have added some cool cameo opportunities, but I don't know. If it extended, I would have liked to see if Milton Fine turned out to be Brainiac. I would have liked to see Doomsday longer. I think that would have fixed the Lex Luthor issues that you have.
It wouldn't have.
No.
Hey, remember that time?
I actually really like Lex Luthor.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about
I
Lex.
disagree. Yeah.
Remember that time that they name dropped Milton Fine a bunch, and then they brought him in for a few episodes, and then that was it. Remember that? So to answer Perry's question, do I wish they had a longer run? It depends. Typical lawyer answer. It depends. If they didn't have to lose their supporting cast, yes, I would have. If it had been more like this, where people are popping in and out, and I maybe others didn't feel this so much, but I really felt people's absence. Like when Lana showed up in the few episodes she was in, those were the episodes where I felt like, oh, this is Superman and Lois.
She was so good.
So that's why it's hard for me to be like, yeah, I definitely would have wanted 7. 7 without a budget cut, sure. I'll be honest, it kind of bugs me a little bit because the producers have talked about, yeah, we wanted to do, this is what they said. They said we wanted to do traditional Brainiac and Darkseid. They didn't go the traditional route with anybody, though. Every season of this show was a misdirect. Though every season. In the first season, you think you're getting Captain Luthor, it ends up being John Henry. In the second season, you think you're getting Doomsday, it ends up being Bizarre. Now, in fairness, at the end of the show, they gave us a version of Captain Luthor. At the end of the show, they gave us the one true Doomsday, comics accurate and all in terms of the visual representation. So they got there, but there was always some sort of twist. So this idea of like, oh, we were going to do just straight Brainiac. It's like, no, you weren't. So
no, you weren't.
I don't know. I kind of have a hard time buying that. So now we'll probably have more to say about that final spiritual montage, but I want to jump to the other, I think certainly going into the season, what we thought more of this was going to be about. And they've addressed this too. The death and return of Superman was another misdirect of theirs. They've talked about how, no, it's really what we get in the series finale. That's the death of Superman that we were doing. So your feelings on the show's take on the death and return of Superman, as we see, particularly at the beginning of the season.
I think I was even surprised. I wasn't unhappy that Clark was back, but he's back in episode 3.
Yeah. At
the end of episode 3, his eyes open, don't they? I mean, it's not exactly like he's gone long. So I was actually expecting he would be gone till episode 5 at least. But they can't have Tyler gone for half of the season.
Well, here's the thing, because you always know there's going to be some curveball with this show. To their credit, they do keep you guessing.
That's not a bad thing.
That's not a bad thing. I really thought, because we had seen a lot of behind the scenes photos of, for example, the Daily Planet softball team and things like that.
Right.
I honestly thought that the quote unquote twist of the season was that he was going to be dead for, I mean, there's only 10 episodes. I really thought he might be dead for like episodes 2 through 9 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
But that you would see Tyler Hoechlin through those. I thought the flashbacks were going to be much more prevalent throughout the season. And I thought between the flashbacks and then the hologram that they introduce of him in the second, I thought that was how Tyler Hoechlin was going to be represented in the show. I didn't think he was going to be gone, but I thought that's how we were going to see him. On this note of the death and return of Superman, the argument has been made that, well, this wasn't an adaptation of the death and return of Superman, to which I would say, okay, I get that. But if you are telling a story where Superman dies at the hands of Doomsday and then comes back to life, you are adapting the story to some degree or another. And like I said at the beginning, I can put aside my fanboy wishes, at least to an extent, if the changes that are made are compelling and yield effective results. And for me, generally they didn't. And I admit this. It's hard for me to separate out what I dislike because it doesn't live up to the original comic book storyline versus what just doesn't work. I fully admit that. And as I say this, there are certain things that it's probably going to be a little bit jumbled together. I fully admit that. But the idea, I have to tell you, man, this is so therapeutic and so cathartic. The idea that Clark just gets beaten to death and doesn't stop Doomsday feels so wrong to me. I don't like it. And you know what bothers me even more? The entire season, he never beats Doomsday. He gets beaten to death at the beginning. Lois is able to talk sense into Bizarro turned Doomsday, and he's off the board. And then when he comes back in his final form, Lex is able to kill him again and present this final form. John Henry's able to take him out with that iron. And then Clark really catches a break when Doomsday decides to kill himself. What a twist.
Yeah. that was confusing to me, actually. I don't know how I felt about that. Like, because seemingly his memory was gone. That was the point of him getting killed again. He was the real form of Doomsday. No, those memories are gone. But then, like, Doomsday Kevin Costner'd us and went, no, don't save me. And then he just falls into the sun. And it just felt, for one of the best, like, creature villains in Superman history, he kills himself? Like, no, I just couldn't. I don't know. I don't dislike it. I just don't believe it. I'm like, okay.
Well, yes, I don't disagree, because at that point in time, I feel like they had made the case that part of him was totally gone. But you know what? The fact that there was, despite what we had seen and been told, that there was some part of him still there that in that extreme moment was able to break through, and we get those flashes and the twisted score for Bizarro, that, believe it or not, of all the things, that kind of worked for me. And it's like, all right, we're even giving a conclusion to him. And to me, it wouldn't be a complete season of any Superman show if some Superman didn't get thrown into the effing sun at least once. So it warmed my heart, no pun intended, that he made it in there.
I would, to kind of close this, that I feel like, to not piss off fans like us, don't make it Doomsday. Just don't make it Doomsday. Like, if you're not going to stay true to it, at least, like, you already said, okay, it's Bizarro. Make him into something else. Don't make him Doomsday. Just make him a creature. Make him something terrible. Make him just an abomination kind of thing. But the minute you make him Doomsday, which they don't call him Doomsday, I don't believe they ever even call him Doomsday.
The DOD does, because it's like Project Doomsday that they're looking at. But yeah, no one ever is like, Doomsday's coming. They always just call him that thing.
Yeah. That's where it gets me. It's like, you know what? You're already doing something different. Don't piss off fans by changing what we know.
Well, that's my point. When the argument is made, well, it's not really an adaptation. It's like, okay, fine. If you have Superman
Don't do
die
it.
through some other means, that's something else. I would be far more.
Yes, that's different.
I always use this example, but the Justice League animated series, when Superman is seemingly vaporized by that Toyman weapon, okay,
Right.
fine. That's a different take on
Yeah.
this. But when Doomsday's in the picture, it's something else. And we had Dan Jurgens and Mike Carlin on the show, and they talked about the inspiration, the motivation for that original storyline. And so from the jump, I was really put off by the idea that Doomsday was this puppet of Lex. To me, that runs counter to the whole notion that he's this unstoppable, uncontrollable force of nature. And yes, I know we ultimately get there by the end of the season, but to me, it's a little too late.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
Well,
I don't think we did.
I think by the time he dies again for Lex in the mines and he's attacking the town, I guess it's kind of nebulous. I don't know that Lex actually could exert any control over him at that point.
But if he was unstoppable in a killing machine, he wouldn't have had any soul left to kill himself in the sun. That's not how it would have
Well, I don't know. I think maybe John Henry's hammer. I think the hammer's like knocked something loose and like fixed him.
You know what? I'm going to stand true to I actually, if you replace Doomsday with just a creature, I'm fine with all of it. Don't make it Doomsday. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Don't piss me off and say it's Doomsday.
But from the jump, the fact that he's Luthor's puppet really put me off. The fact that their battle takes place in space, and more than anything, the fact that Clark is simply killed, that he doesn't. And like, again, I can't separate out my feelings for the source material in this, but if Clark is going to die, it's got to be that he dies in the quest, in the process of stopping Doomsday, not that he just gets beaten to death. It really put me off. And then, like I said, the fact that Lois was able to talk to him, it's like, all right, I guess we got to get this creature off the board for a little while. Fine.
Yeah.
And then in the end, I love that John Henry stepped up with the hammer and all of that. And I do have to say this. In the finale, the part, unsurprisingly for this dad, and I talk about it all the time, but what got me more than anything in the first half of that finale is Clark not wanting the boys to help. And that scene between Lois and Clark where he's like, I'm their father. Like, I have to protect them. And she's like, they don't live in a bubble. You have to let them help you. From that parent perspective, it really resonated. And it's funny. It's talking about connection points to Smallville. Much like Clark had to learn in the series finale of that show, that he had turned his back on both Jonathan and Jor-El. He was trying to just move forward, but he had to accept the guidance of both of them and reconcile both parts of himself. So I kind of had that little feeling there. So that aspect of it I liked, but I don't know. Yeah, it's like Clark could just never beat this Doomsday, like ever. I don't know. No. It's
well, I mean, I did like I'll be honest, I did like the twist. I get you with I don't like that he just got beaten to death. The twist of when he says, bring me his heart. And I at first I'm going like, oh, he's just being like angry Lex Luthor, like bring me his heart. No, he legit meant bring me his heart. And like, that's why I was like, what is that box for? And I was like, oh. And so I did that that was kind of terrifying. Like all of that was pretty rough. And I thought that was kind of cool. You don't really see that often. And I thought, this is a very different Lex, and that's why I was okay with Lex, because I know you don't like this more one-sided Lex, but again, we don't know any better. If you treat it in the vacuum of the show, this Lex works. Don't look at the other Lexes. Try really hard, Anthony. Don't look at anything else. Pretend it's just this show. It works better that way, in my opinion.
All right, more to say on Lex, but on the Dooms, and your point is well taken. But I guess on the Doomsday front, the removal of the heart, it was gruesome. It was striking. I didn't love how it then became this chase to try to reclaim his heart. I didn't care for this business about Lex stomping on it. I also wonder quite how that would work scientifically, given that it's Kryptonian tissue, but whatever. And then Clark is off the board before a surprisingly short amount of time. Like we said, I really thought this was going to be a bigger part of the season. No doubt when Clark lands on the street and they roll his body over and Lois and the boys are there, it's heart-wrenching. I don't dispute that. I don't feel like we really got any or enough of a sense of the wider town, or certainly the world's reaction to Superman being gone. I mean, I know they were limited, and I'm not expecting this, and it's not a competition, but I go to the end of BVS where we have that contrast between the throngs of mourners burying the symbol, and then the small private ceremony in Smallville. Like, all that stuff gets me. And I feel like it really hits. And I feel like we just didn't have like anything close to that here.
Well, what's so funny to me is I almost feel at the end of BVS, that was unwarranted. He was not around long enough to get that. This Superman has been around long enough, and he should have gotten that. And I guess that's my argument. Like, so I'm agreeing with you, but disagreeing with you.
No, BVS, we've already litigated. I'm going to leave that alone. I understand what you're saying. No, but I understand what you're saying. You would expect more. And I feel like they could have, even with their restrictions, they could have done more. I do have to say, it did make me very happy when Jordan was talking to Laura and he's like, oh, I can fly him to the sun. And I was like, yes. And she's like, he can't regrow a heart. And I'm saying to myself, I don't know. I feel like the sun could fix anything. Why don't you throw him in there and see what happens?
Go.
Why don't you give it a shot?
You never know. You never know.
But going back to Carlin and Jurgens, one of the things that they've talked about, and they didn't just say it on this podcast, they've said it in all the interviews they've done about the death and return of Superman. The reason why they did Reign was because they knew there needed to be more than just Superman sitting up in his coffin. And you know what proves them right? This show, because here, that's essentially what happens. I will say another positive. I loved episode 3, Sam's farewell, his sacrifice.
Oh, yes. Everything about it.
That really hit home. And my wife and I watched that together. And
that's on my list.
And she lost her father, just a few years ago. And that was very emotional for us watching that. And I thought, just in terms of bringing to a close that often fraught relationship between Lois and Sam, and seeing the lengths that he went to, and that final recorded message where he's like, Clark's coming back. Like, I loved that. Yeah. But then you get to the end of that episode and Clark just wakes up. And then the next episode, I thought there was going to be a longer journey at the fortress. I wasn't expecting a purple war suit, but I thought there was going to be more of a journey. And he just flies. So I guess he had a change of clothes in the fortress, or he picked up something on the way.
No, he had a black suit. He was in a black jacket. He was in like a sports jacket.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. And again, this would shock. I have in my negatives list, it just felt rushed. And I think that's just, they're limited. They're limited to 520 minutes. That's all they got, and they're like, okay, wait, we got to do the Spark Notes version. What are we going to do? And I think I would be very curious, like, if they didn't feel rushed, what would season 5 look like? But you start it where it starts, okay? And you have another, you're going to be fine. How long would that take? But it was the Sam Lane stuff, man. Like, I will tell you too, even the Sam Lane and the Lois Lane, like all of that, the flashbacks to the wedding, all of the talk about, I don't know if this is a good idea for you to get married. Every one of those scenes, that's one of the best episodes of the season. 3 and 9 are out of control. Good. But it also is a testament to they picked good actors. Like, this show is not phoning it in. Dylan Walsh is awesome.
So, and that's why his absence and the absence of so many others, I felt so much this season. But no, that was so strong. The fact that, yes, he uses Bruno Mannheim's serum on himself that then essentially treats his heart such that it could be a replacement for Clark's, was really something. And in the series finale, during that montage, when Lois passes and she says, Daddy, it really got me. And the producers talked about how if they had the budget, they would have wanted to have Dylan Walsh there to say pumpkin on the other end of that. But even without that, that really, really, really hit home for me. So, that aspect of it, I liked a lot, but, and as I said at the beginning, they could have done a version of Reign of the Superman. I don't think they were interested in that per se, but they had one Superboy to start and 2 Superboys by the end of it, as John's powers finally emerge in this season. Of course, we have Steel, and you could have had, and like I was saying before, why I thought Clark might be dead longer, I figured, well, if you have Tyler Hoechlin playing Cyborg and Eradicator, or if they've been able to bring back Adam Rayner as Tal-Rho, aka Eradicator, you could fill that role that way. They could have done something like that. And it just, as a fan, it just breaks my heart because they had the pieces in place in a way that no other live action version has. And I don't know the next time we'll have an opportunity for that, but that's just not, they were not doing that. I get it.
I wonder too, because of the budget constraints. We'll have to talk about the CGI soon too, but like, I think that was a budget restraint because that's possible more CGI and costuming and hours in the chair and all that kind of stuff. But dude, I'm just gonna tell you, like, I was watching every episode thinking about the budget cuts. I loved the CGI for the last season. I was surprised how good it was considering there was money cuts. So I don't know how you felt about it, but I was very surprised. We saw also, I don't know how much it cost for them to do super speed stuff, but they were doing a whole lot of it and it was solid. It didn't seem cheapened to me.
No, visually it held up in a way that I really didn't expect it to. The costume he comes back with is darker. It's not the black suit though. Did you want a black suit?
I did want a black suit. I wanted a black suit even just for an episode.
Yeah.
Maybe two. But it was it actually threw me off how it was just darker. It wasn't black. It's like, what? Let's just put the blue on.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, why make it so dark that it's almost black, but not give us a black suit? And if ever there were a time where he would need that regeneration suit, it's this point where he has a 60-year-old man's heart and he is aging. I got to say, as a silver fox myself, as I have been called by one of our podcast friends, JJ Hodges. Nice. As someone with gray hair, it did bother me a little bit that's the sign that he's old, is that he's got that gray hair. It's like, all right, take it easy here. Fine. That's fine.
That is the sign.
But yeah. But no, if ever there were a time to put him in the black suit to help him absorb the sun, I feel like that's the time.
It's a battery. He needed it.
Did you think he was going to get his real heart back, or because I the whole time I was like, there's no way Lex destroyed his real heart. So I thought he might get his real heart back. I thought he might get Doomsday's heart. I thought Tal-Rho might come back and die and give him. Did you think he was going to be fully restored, or were you like, no, this is the direction they're going, that he's going to get old and weak and powerless?
The minute they killed the heart and gave him Sam's, I knew that was the direction. You can't and then I think it was it John's scan that kind of was the ultimate, like the heart disease. These are the first signs of heart disease, and those kind of like, oh yeah, that's because then you knew like, okay, he's going to be more of a human than he is super. Which then I looked at it through that lens and saw like, okay, how are they going towards that? And I kind of started to come to terms with it better. So.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like that was the direction. It really felt like, okay, that's the end game we're going towards. My feelings about what might happen with the heart at a certain point, I was like, okay, I don't think I think that's it. It bummed me out. I thought they left something on the table here, not really exploring his PTSD. They touched on it momentarily when he was in the fortress with Lara reliving the fight. And I thought that might be really interesting to kind of show how he's dealing with this, but then they just kind of left it there. But we talked about the afterlife piece from the finale, and this might seem odd given what I said about really not believing in the afterlife, but I do think that they missed a huge opportunity here in showing Clark's spiritual, for lack of a better term, journey after his death at the hands of Doomsday. But I understand they wanted to make that point the first time there was darkness, and then the next time he has this whole experience. Because what I would have loved to see, and I talked about this with Mike Carlin, the aspect of the death and return of Superman that always, it drives me nuts, always gets skipped, is that afterlife experience from Adventures of Superman 500, where Clark and Jonathan encounter each other in the afterlife. It's because it's not just that Clark needed to absorb more sunlight. There was another side to it. There was a spiritual component, and it always gets skipped. And I thought it could have been a really beautiful showcase for Tyler Hoechlin to give him some sort of experience where he's seeing Martha. Maybe he could see Jonathan. Boy, this show was not at all, and I mean like at all, concerned about Jonathan Kent on this series, other than showing him go down in the pilot and having Clark reference the fact that he had a heart attack on the same spot on the street as his father. That was not what this show was built for, like even a little bit, but that could have been an opportunity.
Well, and in the original comic books, Jonathan was alive. Don't forget. Jonathan didn't die to go get, I mean, did he have a heart attack to get his son? Is that what happened?
In the comics? He and Martha were racked with grief, and he was out in the field and he had a heart attack, and then he was in the hospital, and that's when he encountered Clark, and Clark was ready to be carried off into the next realm. And Jonathan was like, no, like you're not just human, you're Kryptonian. You can beat this. And it inspires him to keep fighting. And that's what then allows him to come back. And it's that 1-2 punch. You have to have both. And every adaptation, not just this one, skips it.
Well, and I wondered too if they could have worked in Sam Lane somehow to that too.
I wonder if they could have worked in Seg L from the Krypton sci-fi series.
Oh my God, you're the worst.
I'm the best because justice for Krypton. Justice for Krypton.
Oh, dude, that show's so good. I love that show.
I wanted Seg L to be there.
I was so happy to watch that show.
To be like, grandson. This was my pitch, my headcanon pitch for him during the fight with Doomsday or in the afterlife or whatever. Some
Is that your Cameron Cuff?
It's not. I'm still workshopping it, so don't hold me to it. But I never thought they would actually do it. But I feel like, as we've talked about, I think there was an opportunity to sort of tie those two short-lived shows together. But I would have been happy with Jor-El, with Lara, with Ma, with Pi. I thought they could have done something there, but
I would have loved Russell Crowe to show up. I think that would have been better.
You're as much a child of Earth now as you are of Krypton. You can be a bridge between two worlds.
There's your good one.
Yeah, that's where I shine. I shine with Russell Crowe. We have a few more just comments or questions on the Doomsday front. Most of these we've already hit on, but Javi said, did your feelings on Doomsday and the season overall change by the end? Yeah, I mean, again, overall, I guess they improved somewhat. Clearly, I still had a lot of issues. I was happy that we ultimately got, at least visually, to the one true Doomsday. Should the dog have been named Shelby? Yes. Yes, I think that would have been too deep a cut for people. I think Crypto is the one that everyone, Crypto.
No, Shelby, first of all, my dog is named Shelby. Second of all, and for that reason. Second of all, it should have been Shelby, because if they've made references to Gus Gorman, they certainly could have made references to Shelby the dog.
Well, on the note of Milton, and I know this is more of a tangent, but I really, really wish they had just made Milton Fine Gus Gorman and called it a day, as opposed to naming him Milton Fine, an alias of Brainiac, if you were never going to show us Brainiac. Just make it Gus Gorman. And yes, I know John Henry references a Gus Gorman on his book, but if anything, that makes a better case for why it could have been Gus Gorman, and why in the series finale, John Henry seems to recognize the Milton Fine name. Or maybe it's just the fact that, that's the guy who took my suit. But I don't know. It would have been something if he's like, Gus Gorman? I know a Gus Gorman. I'm going to get this guy.
I'm checking him down.
Brian,
and then it's CGI Richard Pryor shows.
Having just spent all that time with Superman 3, man, bring in Gus Gorman. Not my favorite character, but do something with him.
Nope.
Brian Dempsey says, I was disappointed by how they handled Clark's initial death. It came across as hollow, and I felt no emotional weight from any of the characters. I enjoyed the fight overall, but I didn't understand Clark's heart had been removed, I will say, due to the camera angle on the body. Yeah, it was a little, I can kind of see that, actually. He says, it felt kind of small scale after a massive fight in Metropolis and the Moon to kill him on a mostly empty Smallville Main Street. What is your opinion? Yeah, I generally agree, and we kind of hit on that before. And then A10 Ronker says they did a great job in this final episode. One of my favorite bits was that at the last moment, Doomsday remembered his past and stopped fighting back, thereby sacrificing himself. Yeah, that aspect, other than the fact that it robbed Clark of the opportunity to really, really dispose of this one. Yeah. But I'm glad that the Earth or whatever, the inverse world Superman was a character, and he was made into this monstrosity. So the fact that he had that final moment, it's fine. I can live with that.
You know, what's interesting is that I'm okay with everything if they just didn't call him.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me. Like, I don't know why that bothers me so much, because that's not, I don't know. I should probably not care as much, but I loved how they kind of honored the Doomsday character by killing him over and over again. But because they took that bizarro Clark and made that part of it, I like how they actually focused on that. And I would have rather them not focused on he's the doomsday killing machine. I think it would have resonated with us and other fans possibly, but it seems to not bother everybody. So that's okay.
Agreed. All right, Lex, make your case for this version of Lex.
Okay. So first of all, let me just start with, I love Michael Cudlitz. Like I as an actor, he's so freaking raw and hard. And I love it. And I think it was an interesting take. I like the interpretation. Again, I go from, this is a pocket universe. This is not connected to anything else. And I do kind of like the beard and the red hair. It's kind of a harken back to the 90s. Lex Luthor a little bit as far as that goes. I do enjoy his arc. I know you're saying it's very like quiet or angry, but if you look at all the flashbacks with the fake Contessa and his daughter, and then all of that just constantly building up, and then him just so full of rage he can't even see the daughter in front of him saying, just stop. Like, I'm right here. I don't see it as one-sided. I see as he's staying true to the revenge character. Like he will finish this, and he's lost 17 years of his life, and he wants a penance from Clark and Lois. And I just think there was something harsh about him that I loved. And I also really loved when he was in the business suit for the first time, shaved and clean. I was like, there it is. Like, that's the Lex I wanted. And I just liked it.
All right. I'm glad it worked for you. I think I was pretty open-minded last season when they brought him in. We only got a couple episodes with him, and he was very intense and intimidating and physical. And I thought, okay, this is interesting because you don't typically see that. You don't get that from the character, especially in live action. I mean, Rosenbaum, that Lex had some training and he could mix it up from time to time, and Clark was powerless and they had a couple of tussles. Okay. But generally speaking, he not physically imposing. And this one was, and there was that fire. But at the same time, I was curious to see, okay, how are they going to open up this character? And I don't really feel like they did. I guess when we look at Lex, and we've looked at Lex, there's so many different ways you can account for his animosity towards Superman generally, or Clark in particular. But and it can take different forms, right? So it can be this anti-alien sentiment. It could be jealousy. People used to look up to Lex. Now they look up to Superman. They could be romantic rivals over Lois. They could be childhood friends, and that friendship went astray. It could be that his very existence is threatening or is antithetical to the natural order. Really, none of those are at play here other than this revenge angle. And I don't know, maybe to argue against myself, it's like, well, we're adding kind of another entry into the canon here of what accounts for this. I guess I just didn't feel it was particularly compelling. I felt like at a certain point, it's like, all right, man, when we get to the series finale and Lois is like, well, just do it then. Just kill me and get it over with. I felt her frustration, but not in a good way, not in a way of like, yeah, I love to hate that guy. More like, yeah, I've really kind of had enough of this. Actually, kind of on this note, one of our patrons really summed up my feelings on this. So I'm gonna toss it to Jan here, who says, did you guys find this take on Lex Luthor as frustrating as I did? I think Cudlitz was really well cast and brought a lot when he was allowed to, but this Lex was so one note and revenge driven. There's only so much sympathy I'm going to have for Lex Luthor, of all people, being sent to prison for one crime he happened to not commit, as opposed to all of the ones we know he did. Kind of a massive whiff for me that killed some of my enthusiasm for the season. Now, on the other hand, our pal Tim Bruns says, I've been a fan of Cudlitz's work for some time, especially his performances on Southland and Walking Dead. Though his time in this role was limited, I'd argue he gave us the most fearsome on-screen Luthor performance to date. Thoughts? I mean, I agree he's the most fearsome. That doesn't necessarily, I don't know how far that gets me. And then Brian Dempsey, once again, he says, so we kind of run the gamut here, positive and negative and an in-between. Brian says, I haven't decided how I feel about Lex in this series. It was a lot of manipulation with little action. I felt Lex successfully manipulating Jordan was true to character for both of them, but overall, I don't know that he made a strong impression. Curious what you both think. So
I guess I go back to the arc of this show with him. I, I can. He's clearly revengeful because of him getting taken away. It's in my eyes. He's mad, not that he went to prison. He's mad he was taken away from Elizabeth. It was because as you watch the flashbacks, you see that she is the only thing tethering him the possibility of not being Lex Luthor. And like even the mom says like she's the best part of you. Like and and he had that and wanted to keep that, but then again, he even manipulated the circumstances to try to keep his daughter with him. So I'm not like sticking up for him, but I'm sticking up for the fact that he has a reason in his story why he's so upset because Elizabeth was his exit from being Lex Luthor. And then they removed that by removing her and him into prison. And he's like, you ruined every chance of me finding redemption, basically. That's it.
So I hear you, and honestly, the core idea that he's angry that he was sent to crime for a specific, he was sent to prison for a specific crime he didn't commit, and he lost his daughter because of that. And he tried to get Lois not to run the story, and she went with it anyway. I get that. It's not that I don't think it's a compelling motivation at all, but I need a little more meat on the bone because I get to the point with the Break the Cycle episode where they bring in Elizabeth, and she essentially says like, okay, you can be part of my life. Just let this go. And he can't. And I get that's the point of that episode. He can't break that cycle.
That's
and it's
the drama.
The drama and the tragedy of this character. But I think at that point, whatever sympathy I might have kind of goes away for him. And also, I don't know if this, I don't know how much weight this argument carries, but it's just like, to Jan's point, he killed other people. So here's what I think the show needed to do, but they couldn't do this because it would really make Lois and Clark look bad. If it had been I was thinking about this a lot. If it had been the case that this Lex had bribed people, beaten people, but that was it. He never killed anybody. And then he gets sent to prison for a murder that he didn't commit. Okay, that's something else. But in this version, it's just like, all right, he killed a bunch of other people, just not that one.
Just not that guy.
And so it's like, I mean, I don't know. It's like my sympathy only goes so far. I mean, I love when we finally got to Bruno Mannheim in the penultimate episode, and he was like, why do you think we put him away?
Yes, we're happy he's away.
And on that note, that's what I think the Bruno Mannheim stuff really solidified my dislike of this Lex, because when we saw Bruno again, I'm like, oh, this is a villain who's like a person. He feels real to me. Lex never really felt that way.
Did he feel like a character? Did he feel like a caricature of an angry villain?
Yes. Well, my God, when we get to the end, why won't you die? It's like, what? I don't know. I wish it worked for me more, honestly. And I don't want to belabor the point. It's not a knock on Cudlitz. I've never watched Southland, but it's been on my list forever. I loved him on Walking Dead. I know he directed one of the episodes. He seems like an awesome dude. Like it is not a knock on him at all. I just wish the material had allowed him to show more of his range. I mean, where's the Lex who gives speeches and references history and philosophy? It's like there was no charisma to this Lex.
Yeah, and that is hard. That is hard.
You know, I know people have said like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so fired up about this. I know a lot of people have said, oh, this is like the live action version of the Clancy Brown Lex. Well, yes and no. I mean, to an extent, but there's that magnetism that was just not there. I mean, don't tell that to Amanda McCoy because she was all over this Lex. But I just didn't see it.
We haven't talked about her yet.
I mean, who even is she? I know she was from the early Byrne comics. She was one of the scientists that he roped into working for her, something like that.
But not really. Not really. The problem is she's really more Mercy Graves than she is anything else.
Yeah, so I don't know why they didn't just make her Mercy or Miss Tessmacher or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I did a deep dive into what was her name, Gretchen, who was really named Sharon, who that actually is a character, but not from continuity. She's a character from the Superman Aliens miniseries that Dan Jurgens wrote.
Wait, Gretchen Kelly?
Yeah,
Oh, she was in the triangle. No, she was in the Triangle Era comics. Not her real name though. I got you.
Her real name. When they go to her real name, that's a deep cut from a different miniseries, which is just so weird. But I guess I don't. I liked Lex because he was different than anything we've seen before, and that actually made me happy. I was like, oh, okay, a different look. But I just think he was. I agree with the one-dimensional side of it, but I enjoyed the different take. I'll put it.
Okay, no, that's fair, and
a shorter season.
Yes,
like because it was shorter. If it was longer, we should have had more.
I think even with the shortened season, if he hadn't been a regular, and he missed a couple, but he was in most of them. I think if he had been there less, maybe it wouldn't have bugged me so much, but he was such a big driver that at a certain point, I really just kind of had enough. But I guess a couple of key moments that I want to talk about with Lex. Oh, by the way, Eckworth Industries in the first couple of episodes, a nice nod to the Superboy TV series. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff like that. The charity that they set up in the series finale is called For All Seasons. It's like, yeah, that stuff is very nice. I don't get as much mileage out of that as I know a lot of other fans do. It's fine, like it's cool, whatever. But it doesn't overcome these larger issues that I have. Superman talking to Lex after he returns. They have that face off on the road.
And he's trying to compel. He's almost trying to speak to his human side.
Yes,
like to Lex. Like Lex, just let's stop.
So on the one hand, I think it's a really beautiful idea, and I think that actually does get at the core of Superman. And where there's an opportunity to talk first, where there's an opportunity to set someone straight, he'll take it. And I'm aware at this point in time, Luthor still has Doomsday, and he knows Clark's secret, which is not yet public. Yeah. So Luthor has a few things over him. However, and this didn't bother me when I first watched it, but when I was thinking about it, it really bugged me. Lex killed Sam. It's one thing that Clark can get past the fact that Clark himself died, but Lex is responsible for the death of your father-in-law, Lois's dad, and the boy's grandfather. And you can't let that slide. It really bothered me. Like, oh, I'm going to try to reason with him. It's like, no. Like justice for Sam. It really, I didn't like that.
I didn't think of it that way, but now, he should be, and this is recent.
Yeah.
It's not like it happened last year. It happened like a few days ago.
You can't, this is where people will disagree with this, but it's my feelings. This is where I wanted a little bit of that big screen energy of, I'll bring you in without breaking you. That's the vibe I wanted here.
Yeah.
Now, we do then get that fist fight between them on the rain-soaked streets of Smallville with the red sun lamps.
Listen, I can't tell of your tone. I loved that. I actually liked it. I know. I don't know. I'm surprised you of a Rocky 5 didn't like just like the raw energy of just, no, I'm going to beat you without power.
No, I liked it.
Show you how it is.
No, I liked it.
Okay.
The only negative I have to say is that, so we cut the cable cord over a year ago. So I bought the Prime Pass to watch this season because I can't deal with the commercials on the CW app. The first world problems, but I was like, whatever. And so I would get the episodes at midnight. But my wife's asleep by then. So for most of the episodes, except the finale, I had to watch that right away. And then I watched it again with her. But all the other episodes, we would watch the next night. And inevitably, there were some things that were either outright spoiled for me, just scrolling through social media or YouTube, or that I had a sense of. And so going into this, I said to her, I was like, I think there's like Clark and Lex fight. And because of where we were in this show and all this stuff with Doomsday, I remember saying to her, I was like, I bet he's just going to get his ass kicked. Because that's what I feel like the vibe of this show and this Clark, at least in this season, has been. I'm like, he's probably just going to get his ass kicked by Lex. So the fact that he more than held his own and actually beat Lex, I loved. Yeah. I was very, very happy with that. So that was a fun moment.
I did like how Lex had cameras. I loved that, where he then shows, like, this is who you think your good Superman is. I was like, oh, damn.
Well, it ended up having a good payoff because he then used that footage later on. But in that moment, it really seemed to, what he was saying seemed to be more directed at Lois and the boys. And I was like, I don't think they have a problem with this.
I think they're fine. I think they're fine with the fact they're beating the little crap out of you.
Yeah, it's like I think that's fine. Uh,
Yeah.
when he ultimately gets to the business suit and everything, I mean, he looks like Lex right off the page. Clearly,
Yeah.
that's that's his disguise, right? He's
And in
clearly
the
very
and in the
uncomfortable.
suit, when he's in the power suit too, towards the end, like it came off great to me. Like I love the way he looked in the suit.
Yeah, I mean, well, when we talk about the look of this Lex, I did not get as much mileage out of that beard, the long goatee, whatever you call it, his biker look.
I was glad when it was gone. I was happy when it was
The
gone.
flashback stuff with that wig was rough. That was
Oh, you didn't like it,
oh my god.
I kind of for some reason liked they were trying to throw it back. That was like their poor man's version of the '90s clone of Luther.
You know what's funny? We didn't get as many flashbacks as I thought, but one of the flashbacks in that for one of the early episodes when Lex is in Lois's office and he's trying to convince her don't run the story about him killing Boss Moxie. I got a vibe like that maybe they were going to go down the road of he had a romantic interest in Lois or something like that. I mean, I'm probably reading, but there was something about that scene. There was a familiarity between them that felt to me like
almost a chemistry. Like a chemistry was different. Yeah.
Yeah, even if just one sided, like even if it was just from Lex's, and so I thought like that might be kind of more part of the backstory. And here's the other thing too: that face to face, that face off on the road that we were talking about. If in this version we were in that Smallville territory where Clark and Lex had been friends, then him trying to make that personal outreach that like makes more sense to me. And that's the other thing too with this. He was really Lois's adversary in this more than anything, which I don't know. Maybe I would have just liked to be a little bit more even in terms of, between him and Lois and between him and Superman.
So what else you got on Lex? Are we good? Have you gotten it all out?
I guess the last thing, once he's in the suit, right? That was cool for the most part. Cool. You know what I thought they were going in the series finale, and I'm not even saying I think they should have. This was the feeling I was getting when Clark is yelling, "You come after me, my family, my town. It all ends now." And he punches Lex so hard.
Oh, man.
And Lex looks like he's jelly.
Like the whole suit comes off him. Yeah.
I thought that we were going to get into whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow territory where Lex dies and we get some sort of something from Clark along the lines of like, I knew if I hit him that hard, like his suit wouldn't be able to absorb it. Like I knew what I was doing, just like with Mixus-Pitalik and whatever happened. Like I knew what I was doing. Yeah. I can't do that. I thought that was clearly that wasn't the case. And I'm not even making an argument for it, but that was the feel of it that I had.
Yeah. I again, that was another example where I really enjoyed the CGI too. Like I thought that was very powerful. The punch, the look matched the punch. Like, oh, okay. And he might fall to his death, but now he's going to catch him.
All right, this is a perfect question for you. My last real Lex question, I guess. Since you were a fan of this version, did you feel that moment of forgiveness in the spiritual montage was earned?
No, I did not like that.
I hated that.
It felt forced and unnecessary to me. That's what I was like, well, and especially where it was. I would have loved it because guess what? Lex got what he needed. He was back in prison, and Bruno Mannheim was like, "Okay, you're ours now, buddy. Thanks." Like, and that was it. Like book closed on Lex Luthor. I believe in forgiveness, and I totally believe in grace, but I don't know. It felt forced and odd to me, especially where it was pigeonholed. No. Maybe do it earlier. I eventually forgave Lex. Do it in the montage of the flash forwards, right? Like do it where Lex is now old because he's old. Like show Lex in prison serving life, the same age as Superman, now that age. That ultimately, Lex, I forgive you.
Yeah.
And eventually I forgave Lex. Do it then, not as this. Oh, you're both dead? No, stop.
That felt so out of place. And you know what's so funny? Everyone he sees, they're in their prime. including himself, except Lex, to the point where I looked at that figure sitting at the table and I was like, who the F is that? I was like, is that Pa Kent? I was like, who is that? And he's teary-eyed after being Bruno's bitch in prison for who knows how long.
Jeez, his chair.
Yeah, I just didn't. That felt very off to me. Did you watch Scrubs by any chance?
A good amount of it. Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, in the season 8 finale, which was ostensibly the series finale before they did a 9th season that was really a spinoff, our main character takes this final walk down the hallway of the hospital on his last day. And he was always prone to these fantasies. And so as he turns the corner and he walks down the hallway, all the supporting characters and the bit players who had been there were all lined up, and he had these final moments. And it's a chef's kiss. I love it. There was a point where Clark turned the corner in the house, and I was like, oh, all the people are going to be there. It's going to be, and that wasn't the case, but I thought we had a couple. We had Lana and John Henry, and they did what they could. We
had the ones we could afford to pay.
You know, it's so funny. The episode where Candace breaks up with Jonathan after the secret identity goes public, and she does it over text or over the phone. I said to Steph, I was like, "Oh, that's because they can't afford to have her in this episode." But then she showed up. I was like, "Oh, look at that!"
That was one of my favorite moments because Lana and I watched it every episode together for all of season 4. Candace shows back up. Lana audibly goes, "Oh God, I hate Candace," and I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, don't bring back Candace. She is not a fan favorite. We don't like her. We don't like her dad. Let it be done. And they brought back both of them.
I know Candace is tough. It was a real I think too deep a hole for her to climb out of after all that business with the XK in season 2. I mean, I like her as much as I possibly can, but that's only limited. The other big thing, we got to talk about the secret identity reveal, but a couple of quick questions here. So this is from our pal Chris McKenzie. He says, we all know how limited they were in terms of budget and actor availability, but I really miss Sarah throughout the season, especially her interactions and friendship with the boys and Natalie. Now that it's all over, I really did miss the teen angst. Or is that just a Smallville fan in me?
Yes, and yes. I agree. I learned to like Sarah a lot. The more she grew as a character and the more she was kind of maturing faster than the boys were. So I did miss her actually. And I thought it was good that moment where she realized like, I don't need to stay here. I can go somewhere else.
Yeah. Look, this was tough, right? She had her whole little arc, as it were, getting to the point of going to study abroad. You had Kyle and Chrissy almost getting married, deciding not to, but staying together, and then trying to get their house and needing to sell their stake in the paper. They ultimately sell it to Lois. John
Which
Henry.
Yeah.
But it's just, there's not as much to say here because there just wasn't real estate for them. John Henry and Natalie working for the DOD and struggling with that. Lana, I really did like with Lana when she rallied the town against Lex. I thought that was great. And kind of on that note, this kind of leads us into the secret identity reveal, which I would say is the other huge pillar of this season that we have to talk about.
Yeah.
And we have one last question from Brian Dempsey to tee this up here. The addition of Jimmy Olsen in the flashback scenes really drove home that Superman had no relationship with any of the classic supporting cast. In the first season, we see Lois was immediately drawn to Clark, not Superman, which was great. But now Jimmy isn't really Superman's pal either. He's barely Clark's pal. Lex has history as a criminal, but doesn't seem to be Clark's arch enemy or even have history with Clark. And was there ever a Perry scene? Yeah, there was very fleeting, I think, in one of the early episodes. Am I misreading these relationships, or did you clock some of this too?
I don't know. I think he was closer to Jimmy than the show lets on. I think, especially bringing him back to the diner and just saying like, "Hey, man, like, I'm sorry," and like, I liked that, and I think you could tell they were friends, but they just grew distant.
So I know you're a fellow Everwood fan, right?
A big Everwood fan, and he was the director of some of the episodes.
Yeah, so hashtag for Everwood, the late great WB drama Everwood, 4 seasons, the late Treat Williams, Gregory Smith, who went on to, he acted on a show called Rookie Blue for a number of years, but then he segued into directing for Greg Berlanti, who was the creator of Everwood. So he directed a bunch of Superman and Lois, including the series finale. And in the Regular Guy episode where Clark reveals his identity and you see the crew, that was the real Superman and Lois crew. And the AD in that was Gregory Smith.
Yeah.
which is cool.
If you like, and Everwood also has, if you're a fan of Chris Pratt, Chris Pratt is young, teenager, chunky, funny Chris Pratt. Way
Yeah,
back.
Chris Pratt is there. Young Emily Van Camp is there. Oh, it's such a beautiful
yeah.
show. I'm so due for a rewatch.
Yeah, we're gonna watch it together.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah.
Gregory Smith's younger brother, Douglas Smith, was the actor who played Jimmy on Superman.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Now,
Nice.
Generally speaking, all of the issues that I have cited in this episode here, and hopefully folks are still with me. Some might have been like, all right, I love this season. I don't need to listen to this. That's fine. I got to get this out either way. We're
like, he's at an hour and 52 minutes. We're good.
All of the issues I've had really have been on the writing side. Not to beat up on our poor writers, but I think the performances, our group of actors here, phenomenal.
Yes.
This is probably the least favorite Jimmy Olsen of mine of all of Superman media. And I don't know what the hell was going on with this, because it's one thing if they want to play it that Jimmy might have a little bit of a crush on Clark. It's 2024, gay, straight, bi, beautiful. It's all good. They could have gone down.
Is that how you took it? Did you take it?
Well, no, that's the thing. If it had been that, fine. But I feel like, and I haven't seen Douglas Smith in anything else, but I feel like he played Jimmy like a psycho. He looked so crazy to me. Like a stalker. Those look, he was too into Clark. And it wasn't just like, oh, he might be kind of sweet on Clark. I feel like he wanted to like wear Clark's skin. It was too much.
It's like, put the lotion in the basket.
It was too much. I did not care for this Jimmy, man. Like,
I didn't fully catch that. Now I'm worried I'm going to rewatch and be like, oh, yep.
Just look at his eyes. I mean, I don't know if it was just a performance choice, the direction. I don't know what, but I don't know. It did not work for me. I did not like this Jimmy.
He was so excited to be in his brother's show.
So Rick Reason says, what were your thoughts on the secret reveal? I still hate that in any version. I think the only people outside of Heroes that should know should be his parents and Lois, but not until the engagement. So this is the other huge swing that this season takes here.
Big swing. Yeah.
Right. Where very early on, Lex finds out the secret. Jordan is careless in going after him, trying to get the heart, and Lex puts it together. And then it gets to this point where, hand in hand with that, you have a number of townspeople who saw the intense personal grief of the Kent family upon finding Superman's heartless body on the streets of Smallville. And they put it together and they start making these comments, and Clark realizes, I need to put the genie back in the bottle. And so he has these various encounters where he tries to divert suspicion.
I do like all that.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually liked all of that.
And then decides, and then we have the diner scene. Yeah, go for it.
And again, like, it's really funny that in this show, there are two diner scenes. First one, I love. It's one of my favorite Superman scenes ever. And the second one, I'm like, you suck. Why do we do this? Because there's no way around it. The way they set it up. Like, no, they're going to now tell everybody. And I just don't think it works, because they don't fully understand the impact of what would really happen in the real world if everybody knew that Clark Kent was Superman. They would not just be coming with a group of lovely teenagers coming to see the two boys. That town would be overrun. There would be no peace whatsoever. Military would be involved. The police would be involved. The government would be involved. Like, I can go on and on. It's stupid. Stop doing it. That's all I have to say.
Like I said, this is going to be fodder for one of our early episodes next year. We're going to really unpack this, because between that New 52 arc, The Truth, and then Bendis's own version of Truth in the comics, and the Supergirl series finale, and this final season, we have seen numerous instances where a super character has revealed their identity to varying results. But I have big picture issues with this, but specifically here, I guess what bothered me was, and I will say, the actual scene in the diner where Candace's dad comes back, and the way that plays out with the slow-mo and everything is beautiful.
It's not about the performance to me.
Or even, again, just kind of the direction of that scene was great. But first of all, I feel like they kind of throw Jonathan and Martha under the bus. Lois does, and kind of talking about how they were so worried. And they kept such a tight lid on everything. I don't know. That's my loyalty to the Kents. I just feel like it did them a little bit of a disservice. My ideal version to totally play Monday morning quarterback and rewrite this, what I thought they were going to do, and what I think would have been a more elegant solution to all of this is, I wish the townspeople hadn't been so in Clark's face about what they think they know. I really wish that this had been a town secret that they really kept amongst themselves. And what I would have loved is a moment in the finale or close to the finale going up against Lex or whoever they're going up against, where Clark, not yet in his Superman costume, but Clark is in something like that. And the people kind of rally.
They come.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they rally around him and they say something to the effect of like, for all you've done for us, Clark, we've got you. We've got your back. And it could just be ambiguous.
I'll do you one better. That could have happened in the diner scene.
Yes. That's what they,
yes. Yep. You know exactly what I'm saying. Because really, it could have been every one of them standing up and then like standing in front of Clark, like just one after another standing in front of Clark saying, "You're not welcome here."
That would have been perfect. Or they could, this was the other thing I was thinking with the diner scene is like, if it played out exactly as it did, but then, Candace's dad is like, look, he's Superman. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? That we didn't see that.
Or yes. Or let's continue to quarterback to have one of the people, which you could have had Kyle in the diner. Remember, Kyle was in the original diner scene, and to Kyle grab him and slam him against the bar and say, "I thought weren't you here last time when Clark said, you ever show up here again, he will end you." And that's it. It's done. There's a way around it. For me, I'm not writing a show. The show is written well. It's good performed show. At the same time, like the repercussions of the plot don't match the plot. And that's what bothers me sometimes. It's like, that's not realistic. And if you're living in this realistic universe where you're treating them like real people, you have to act like real people are going to respond like real people.
1,000%. Look, in the Bendis run, I thought it was silly, but at least they accounted for it where Clark continues to go to work at the Daily Planet, but it's fortified. There's all these security measures. Yeah. Like, okay, fine. Here you see a couple of military trucks on the farm and then that's it. And you see that little group of people outside the diner waiting for the boys. And then by the next episode, when there are the people outside the Gazette, they're there to protest Lois after Lex has gone on his public opinion campaign. So I just feel like this was not an accurate depiction of what his life would be like. I mean, with the world knowing, had they kept it smaller, and here's the thing, Clark, what Clark goes through in trying and lying to everybody, especially as he's trying to put the genie back in the bottle when he goes to little Timmy, that kid annoyed me, but when he's at little Timmy's house with the mother and he's outright lying. If it had gotten to a point where, once more, within the confines of this town, he shares with some people or whatever, that's something else. But once you announce it to the world, it's just opening this can of worms that I really feel did not accurately account for.
Well, and again, not to rewrite a plot, but the sentiment could have been the same if they did a town hall meeting and not a national world news coverage. Like, listen, we love all of you like your family. This is a community we live in. We know you love us. We want this to be this town secret. Can you help us? Yep. That's it. And that would be cool. And it would have the same sentiment, just not as many repercussions.
And I think if there's a theme in what we've been saying, especially when we talk about the very end of the show, I think it's just, I just would have pulled back a little bit on certain things. That's Agreed. Really all. I think it was just a little bit. It was just a little bit too much. So yeah, with the secret identity reveal, and I still just don't like this idea that this is some sort of, I don't know, graduation level event for him. It's like eventually he has to put those glasses down. It's not the way I see the character. I get what they're going for though, because you get to the end, and as he explains, he uses his celebrity and is able to. But I don't know. I seriously, he could have done that even if he still had some anonymity as Clark.
I guess for the podcast listener too, like, I don't want you to hear us saying that we didn't enjoy the season, but there are things about the season that did rub us just odd, where there were decisions made that seemed not true to the tone of what the show meant. But I will say that the fourth season matched the tone of the show very well as a fourth season to finish the show. But like you're saying, I don't know fully whether they had the time to either edit this well or really look at the continuity the way it would fall. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that I can even go so far. I really, because I was really reflecting on how I felt after watching each episode, and with a couple of exceptions, I really wasn't that thrilled coming out of each of those episodes. And I know there were a lot of people, I've used him as an example before, our friend in podcasting, Michael Bailey, who reviewed all of these episodes for Superman homepage. And I mean, just like 5 out of 5s across the board for him. Like he really seemed to have a very personally meaningful, like powerful experience with these episodes. And that's beautiful. Like I really wanted to, but I just, whether there were things that I felt truly just didn't work, or I just really disagreed with the choices, there was a lot that really kind of put me off about this. My opinion of the finale improved watching it again. I suspect were I to sit down and watch this entire season again, I'm sure I would feel more positively towards it. But this is, look, audience, for better or worse, like this is a pretty immediate reaction to the season. And this is kind of what I've been feeling. So that's part of when we say this is a journey, this is part of what it is. And I might feel differently down the line, but for now, like, this is kind of where I am. There was more that didn't work for me than did. I'm sad to say, I really am.
And I don't know if I don't think I'm quite where you are. I do think that we're still processing. I think that's the important thing to think about. I think, and you said we're today is Thursday. We watched it Monday night. You watched it Tuesday. Like, I think this is kind of gut reactions. And if you think about past podcasts you and I have done together, how we've turned the tide on when we went and saw original movies that we saw in the theater versus looking at them 10 years later, not 10 days later. So, something I thought about was there's a lot of comic books that I read that don't do well as monthlies. But when I read them in a trade form, I love them because there's something to be said about how they work together. I wonder if I watch this season in more of a binge format where I don't put a week between each one. I watch it like one day at a time and go, oh yeah, I see what they're doing here. And it's a story, not a serial. And it's not broken up that way. For that matter, I would love to watch season 3 into 4 back to back. I think that would be very interesting to do too.
All right. Hot take. People are really going to disagree with, a few people will agree with me. Most will disagree. I said this at the time. Look, I'm not going to go so far as to say I wish we didn't have the season. I'm not saying that. I'm not. Had season 3 been the end, like we feared it might be, and we ended with that Rocky 3 photo finish freeze frame of Superman and Doomsday on the moon, here's why I would have been okay with it. Here's why though. Clark had already won because he was down and out. And as he was being pulled into space, the memories of all the people in Smallville revived him, restored him, brought him back. And then he was ready to face off. And whatever happens after that, we can fill that in our minds.
It's what, how did it end for you? And you're saying it was like, we know that Superman wins.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether he wins in that moment or he dies and comes back, he'll win in the future. So to be clear,
I hear you. Yeah, I get it.
The last thing with the identity reveal, I'm still workshopping this. Don't etch this in stone yet.
Workshopping.
You know how the episode is called A Regular Guy or Just a Regular Guy, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Clark says. He's like, I'm just a regular guy. I'm just a father. I'm a husband. Yes, I'm with that to a point. And as I've always said, I look at the character as a man with the powers of a god, and he chooses to use them the way he does because of how he was raised. And he does what he can to help. It's just that he's able to do a lot more. And I agree. And I think ultimately that's in keeping with what's presented there in I'm Just a Regular Guy. I do think there's a little bit of a fallacy though with Superman to go too far in that direction. He's not just a regular guy. He is, I'll bust out my Russell Crowe. No, I won't. He's the bridge between two worlds, and he's a child of both Earth and Krypton. I don't know. I think there's a little bit of a risk of painting him as too much of like, oh, he's just a dude. There's a little bit more to it. So I don't know that I'm fully on board with like that kind of presentation.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with he was raised by humans. He was loved by people. He's learned how to love because of this. Like, he's one of us in that way, but he's not. So yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I need to know when I'm allowed to talk about the boys.
Now let's talk about the boys. That was probably the aspect I enjoyed the most. So please go for it.
Okay, so
It sounds like maybe you didn't enjoy them that much.
This is where the fans might be pissed off at me. So, okay. I was not happy when they started the show and there were two boys. I was never excited about that prospect. And something I wrote a list of positives and negatives about not just the season, but also a little bit about the show. And like, it has nothing to do with the actor. But I think Jordan's story arc is terrible. I think they kind of do him dirty all the time. I think he is always made to be like a whiner and a little bit too angsty and a little bit too sad. And like, there is a part of me that goes, I just wish they just did Jonathan and just did it like the super son and did one. I think they could have addressed both things that both kids have gone through with just one kid. It felt way too like a WB show. Where we could have the two kids. That's just my take. If I saw a lot of like, oh yeah, like he had some redeem. I don't feel like he fully grew by the end of season 4. And that's my opinion. And it just kind of gnaws at me a little bit. So I don't know. Where are you at?
Bernie, I just think you're too critical. I think you got to just lighten up.
You're the worst.
No, I hear you. Look, can Jordan be grating at times? Yeah.
They just made him unlikable unnecessarily. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, as much as I had issues with Lex, the test that he puts Lois through, where she has to pick which one to save.
Oh, yeah, I'll give you that.
And she chooses Jonathan because at that point he doesn't have the powers, and then of course Jordan finds out. I mean, that I thought was compelling. The fact that then Jordan decides to just bench himself for so much of the season, didn't get much out of that. I like John finally developing powers, although at the same time I thought there was something really interesting about there being that split. One having powers and one not. But when they finally kicked that in, and I think at that point, especially with Clark being gone and then Sam dies, like I think you need a little bit of oomph. I did like that they finally, I guess you figured they would do it at some point, and the producers have said they would have done it later. So the fact that they did it here, we have the training. Yeah. I really did love when you had Clark training both of the boys in the penultimate episode, and everything he was saying about how I did everything alone. I had to practice alone. I had to learn alone. I trained in the fortress alone. You guys have each other. That was great. And then when they do team up to help him in the finale, fraternals, and they go after like that stuff, I did like a lot.
All right, I'll give you. But see, like, I like those aspects, but I guess what I'm frustrated by is how they made him so unlikable. They didn't need to make him so different, Jonathan. I know that exists. I know siblings are different, but at the same time, like it constantly seemed like the pity party was such a wide gap between the rest of it just frustrated me. I don't know.
Did you like when he calms down Vicky May at the diner and he relates the panic attack experience? I thought that was strong.
That was very good. I'll give you. Yeah, I'll agree with that. I shouldn't say I don't like everything. I just didn't love most of it. I think that's it.
I hear you. And I will say his sort of benching himself, that bit grew old, especially when there were times where it's like, you need to get in the action here. Like, you know,
like if you're here, we need you. Like,
yeah. So there were things I like. I mean, I don't think this is a surprise to people. Most of the stuff dealing with the fathers and the father and the sons in the beginning when Jordan says like, we'll get the heart back. This is how we save dad. Like that determined, those were all the things. And then, like I said, everything in the finale about Clark realizing he needs to let the boys help him. All of that is what resonated most with me. I regret that so much of this ended up being the things that bother me, but that's just, like I said, that's just kind of where I am. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
Oh, Tom Cavanaugh.
Oh yes, as Godfrey, their little dark side tease.
Yeah, and I'm such a sucker for him. I love that actor. I've loved him forever, and it was just like, oh, that's kind of a nice somehow to bring him back into the fold. But that was a nice little treat.
Well, wait, actually, on that note, did you think, or did you hope that in this final season, or in this series finale in particular, that we would get a cameo from Stephen Amell as the Spectre, or Melissa Benoist as a version of Supergirl, or Grant Gustin crossing worlds? Like, do you think they were going to do that? Did you want that because look, we're talking about season 4 of Superman and Lois, which is the conclusion of that specific show, but it is also the end of the Arrowverse, even though, as we learned at the end of season 2, it doesn't take place on the same Earth as the other Arrowverse shows, but it still was born out of that. So it is truly the end of an era.
Yeah, so this Clark is not the Clark that is on her world.
Correct.
On Supergirl's world. Yeah, so I wasn't as bothered by that. I think if you do that, it'd be actually more confusing to just suddenly have her show up. I didn't really need. I don't think we needed any more cameos or people to show up. I mean, I really, like you said, I just like the supporting cast. I would have liked to see them more. But I'm sad the show's done. Like, and like you're saying, it's the end of an era. That's a long time to have DC shows on a channel.
Yeah, and look, it all started with Smallville on the WB, and then migrated over to the CW, and really paved the way for that Arrowverse. And I guess, kind of on that note, I do want to say, my interest waned in the Arrowverse, and I gave up on virtually all of the shows before the end, except Arrow, which I did watch all the way through. But
I watched all the way through Arrow also, yeah.
But at their best, they were great. And I would argue virtually all of them had very, very strong early seasons. And then I think they kind of hit a bit of a wall. And I think you saw the pattern repeat with all of the shows. But when it was good, it was great. And the same I want to say about Superman and Lois in particular. I know, if you go back and listen to the episodes we did on season 1, season 2, season 3, vastly more positive. I hate to kind of end on this note, but on a positive, what I will say is that even despite these misgivings that I have about season 4, it doesn't diminish the overall love and appreciation I have for the series. I still think this was a wonderful entry in the Superman canon. And I'm glad, whatever disagreements I might have, I'm glad they ended the way they wanted, and it's a complete story. And I like to think this is something that I feel like this is a show people will discover years from now, and they'll be like, what a little gem this 4 season run is,
That's not even an understatement. I mean, I not only see myself rewatching this a lot. I mean, think about all the shows that you rewatch. I mean, I just rewatched the 1978 Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. Like, I was like, I love this show. I got it on Blu-ray with a gift card. I was like, I'm going to rewatch it. I loved it. It was nostalgic. I will rewatch this show. I love this show. Day one, when I saw Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch take over, even in Supergirl, I was like, yeah, these are good people for these roles. And they did nothing but grow. They did nothing but grow on me. And like, I am very sad that it's over. Like, I really, truly love this show. I don't know. I don't know, man. Like, it's hard to say like who's your favorite Superman actor, but I really could have watched him for 7 seasons be Superman, to be perfectly honest. And same with her. I adored her.
The two of them were tremendous, and I think were wonderful ambassadors for the show and for the characters generally. And I don't want to. I know it's going to sound like a knock to the Arrowverse, but it's like this show was better than it had any right to be. I mean, at the outset of this, I was pretty skeptical about the show because I thought it was going to be more of the same. And visually, stylistically, narratively, thematically, they really achieved something distinct from those other shows. And this show and these actors, they carry the ball at a time when there was a lot of uncertainty about the big screen future of Superman. And there's something really to be said for that we had this dependable, really strong take on the character. And the Superman and Lois, the title characters, I think the characterization and the way those performers brought them to life was always true and on point throughout. And I feel confident in saying that. So I think that's a positive note to end on, unless there's anything else you want to say before we sign off.
No, man, that's the way I want to end it. Cause I think listeners should know that while there were things we would have done differently or maybe liked to have seen differently, I will always think like seasons 1 through 4, especially, like I love the arc of this show and how it made me feel as part of the Superman fandom. I loved it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, audience. Whether you agreed with me or us or not, I appreciate you listening. Feel free to share your take as well. I would love to hear it. So thank you all. Happy holidays. And make sure you join us when we return in early 2025. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Be sure to check out our sister podcast series, Another Exciting Episode in the Adventures of Superman, an episode-by-episode breakdown of the classic George Reeves television show, available wherever you get podcasts. Please join us on social media, become a patron, and subscribe, rate, and review today. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all.